Amazing. So,
Awesome.
should I just start?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks for doing this. I mean, I know you were, it's like, it's hard out there, so we're definitely excited to have this topic be presented. Um, and also, we don't get a lot of Korea type topics, so excited about that as well. So, yeah, if you want to introduce yourself and yeah, take it from there.
Absolutely. Well, hi, y'all. First off, I'm Kirsten. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thankful to NABEA for having me, as well as my patience, and their patience in my scheduling. Note to self, reply faster. That is the lesson here. Um, but yeah, so I'm Kirsten. I'm here to talk to you about unique situations, which I'm hoping if you're like in the Korea sphere, you've heard about or it's at least made its rounds. Um, this is my baby, my brainchild, so I'm so excited to talk about her. And even 3 years out from this project, I'm so happy to see that it's still getting attention and getting love. So, yes, unique situations. Click, okay. So who am I? What is a talk without credentials, right? So I'm an ethnomusicology academic. I graduated from Princeton in 2021. So I was a pandemic grad. Shout out to my pandemic grads. And I majored in music with certificates slash like minors in ethnography and East Asian studies. I say that because often in these spaces, it's a lot about what you've done, yes, but where you came from. So I want to acknowledge that privilege as well. Um, so upon graduating Princeton, I went to South Korea. So I was in Korea from 2021 to 2022 on a Fulbright. And my research grant was specifically on the relationship between Black people, Black music, and Korea. You heard that right. Black people, Black music, and Korea. This means a lot to me, not only as a musician, but as a Black person. And I'm happy to talk further about kind of like what that journey was. I often say serendipity is my favorite word. And so I feel like this is a very serendipitous happenings that I stumbled into this. I'm currently based in Boston, if you're curious, working at a nonprofit called LGBTQ Senior Housing, because I'm also queer. It's also a very important part of my identity. And again, kind of sharing these things. So going in and talking about unique situations, you know, my positionality and where I'm coming from in relation to Korea. Um, Definitely need to work on my Korean. So if you would also like to practice 연습 that 한국어, as it were, please let me know. As well as, I mean, this presentation is going to be in English because I don't have topic like that. But yes, hopefully in the future, 5, 10 year plan, whatever, a PhD and I can return to Korea. But for now, we're going to talk about what is unique situations, why it's needed, a bit of history between the relationship between, yes, Black people, Black music in Korea, but how that's situated, how that's currently situated with other things like COVID, with queerness, and again, with music. That's just my lens. I'm a music person. What can I say? We're also going to be talking a bit about Web 2.0, and if you don't know what that is, that's more than fine. We're going to be going over it, as well as how that was instrumental in getting this project off the ground. And part of when I do talks like this is I want to equip you with the tools to be able to do your own unique situation, whatever that may be, wherever that may be. Because community organizing is really important. It's really easy to get bogged down, especially given today's political climate, with things. But this is tangible proof, something that has worked for me and worked for many others, to either mobilize or to protect their own communities. So let's get into it. First off, what is Unique Situations? So, Unique Situations, a community guide to nightlife in Korea, is a digital list of 70 plus nightlife spaces, so bars, clubs, um, music joints, etc., in Korea, that are welcoming and accepting of Black and Brown individuals as well as those who are queer. And I'll use queer and LGBTQIA plus interchangeably, so drop in the chat if that makes you uncomfortable, or if you'd prefer I used other verbiage. So one of the things is why is this needed? I'll get into that a little bit later, but we took these 70 plus places and we organized them by the five largest cities in Korea. Kind of looks like this. It was also very important to me that this is digitally accessible to anybody. So this is completely free. The link is still in my Instagram and TikTok bio to this day. My TikTok is also down the way. To be able to, and I know words are hard, y'all. To be able to distribute this, as I know it still has some use. Now, I want to note, like, this is 3 years after publication, and things move very quickly in Korea. If you live in, like, we call that pali pali, okay, very quickly. So some of these places might not exist, they might have changed, or other things might have happened there that we're not aware of. So I've also had questions like, oh, are you going to update the list? And if they give me funding, sure. But this was an undertaking, and I think I would rather encourage, again, like other people or a newer generation to kind of come in and keep doing this work. Not to say that I am not open to keeping it going. But yes, this is Seoul, Busan, Daejeon, Daegu, and Jeju. So some things to note are these are at least five of the most like popular cities in Korea. I know like other ones exist. I know always in comment sections, people are like, why didn't you do like X, Y, and Z? Or why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? And girl, if I had the time, I would do all of Korea. I'd bop around and you guys would have a list that's 10, 15 pages long. So again, maybe with the funding. But for now, this is what we've got. And the reason that this is a community night guide or a nightlife guide is because it was vetted by the community. So the way that we went about creating unique situations was first, I put out a call on my social media as well as I teamed up with a pretty famous TikToker, an expat TikToker at the time. His name was Expat Pat. And he had, I want to say like 100K, 200K, or a large amount of much more than I had. Okay. And basically, I used his fluent influence along with other influencers and things that I had met in the expat sphere to distribute this ask. The ask being share places that you've had positive experiences with. Now, I know the first thing you want to say is why not share places that you've had negative experiences with? Well, Korea has very strict defamation laws. And so even like commenting or suggesting on public platforms that certain spaces were not good or racist or homophobic, we could be charged and lose our visas. So this was very like not necessarily hush hush work, but we worked within the law, which is instead of sending bad experiences and putting ourselves at risk for defamation, send good ones. Send ones where you're like, oh, I had, great night at X, Y, and Z. So when people sent those in, we then compiled a list. Then we took the list and we distributed it out to the community again. We said, this is a list of places that people have suggested for this list of safe spaces. And then we said, if you've had problems at these spaces, DM us. Don't comment. Again, DM us to avoid defamation. So then, as soon as people started DMing us, it was immediately nixed off the list. But we also had to be clear, like, girl, it's not you just had a bad night or you didn't like the music or things. It has to be specific instances of being denied, racism, homophobia, you were uncomfortable, things like that. And so then we knocked the ones off that people said were not welcoming. Then we did the same thing again, another call for places, as well as we said, okay, here's the second version of it. Same thing again, DM us if there are, spaces that are not welcoming. So we did this 2-3 times, I believe. And then by the end, we had our list. And we were also, this is, I think, really cool as a musician, able to get like what kind of music that they play. So often you can see on the list where it says it'll say hip hop or it'll say Latin or things like that. So not only does it have the address and the place, it has the city. And we also specified places that are safe for LGBTQ queer individuals with a little asterisk. So as you can see, this was a community effort. It wasn't just me going to every one of these places, although I definitely would, be too much time. We needed something immediately, which begs the question, why was this needed in the first place, right? But why? Pourquoi? So xenophobia, racism, homophobia, and colorism all exist in Korea. They're global phenomenons, if you want to call them that, but they exist all over the world, and Korea is no different. So, three specific things seem to heighten these four specific things. So, one was discrimination at clubs and bars due to race. And so, again, I had mentioned TikTok previously. Very grateful to TikTok actually, because now people have this platform where if they wanted to pull out their phone and show people like what was happening, they could in live time. So not only was my partner, expat Pat, harassed outside of a club and got it on his live, but other prominent expat, specifically Black women, shared their experiences of quite literally being told no, but then, saying no foreigners or things like that, and then white women being allowed to stroll into the club. So we know what this is. We are seeing directly that Black and brown people, and as well as these women, were physically like picked up and shoved or like pushed. So now it's getting to a point where, people are being accosted, people are being harmed, outside of just not being let into places, not being let into places. And then I mentioned I also went during the pandemic. So I call it selective pandemic panic, because there was this belief that Korea was good, but it was foreigners who brought COVID into Korea. And actually, when I entered the country, this was still the prevalent opinion, was that foreigners were the ones who brought COVID to Korea. We know this is not true. Maybe some people did, but COVID was everywhere at this point, and it was anyone's game how it got there, as well as overt homophobia in Korea. So I specifically am mentioning the pandemic in relation to homophobia, because not only is, Korea has homophobic, I don't want to say tendencies. I really don't like deeming a certain country homophobic or not, but say that certain people in that country are homophobic. And I say this because specifically Itaewon, which is a neighborhood in Seoul, is known for its queers and it's known for its foreigners. And people at this time believed that Itaewon was like the COVID central. And so they're like, foreigners are spreading it, gay people are spreading it. And people actually also were put in danger because they were outed, because people were like, oh, I saw you in Itaewon, like you've got COVID or things like that. So these three things are causing a lot of problems. And again, where people are being physically harmed. And it got to a point where I truthfully, like, I was so tired of it. I couldn't stand it. And I say this isn't a new thing because this was, yes, in 2021, 2022. But I went to Korea in 2019 as a study abroad student. And the biggest club in Seoul, one of the biggest in Asia, Octagon, I was denied from, and my white friends let in. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be because I'm fat, it could be because I'm Black, like all of these things. But at the core of the issue, I'm not allowed to access a space, but my friends who are lighter skinned or white are. And not only that, when I bring in the music aspect, I'm hearing my music outside of these clubs, right? Our music. I'm hearing Black American popular music, what I'm there to study, and I can't enter that space. So it's kind of, excuse my language, fucked that, my music, a music that our people created, is yes being enjoyed and distributed, and gentrified and all of these different things, but I can't access a space that is directly benefiting from my culture. So this is also important to contextualize in history. So one of the biggest, myths or things that I'd like to dispel is that homophobia didn't exist in Korea until Westerners brought it to Korea. It's not true. We can talk about many accounts before, specifically in the Shilla dynasty, which was from 57 BCE, Three Kingdoms period, way back there, y'all. As well as the Samgakkyusa, which is it is a history-based like text of like histories and legends of Korea's founding. And there are instances of both of these, the Samgakkyusa being from like they estimate it from like 1281 to like 1285, right? So again, these are before, say, maybe Westerners had made it to Korea, but mainstream Westernism had not. Both mention not only same-sex erotica and romance, but also these hwadongs, these flower warriors that also wrote like gay poetry, and loved each other and things. So to say that homophobia or like gayness came from the West is wrong. It has existed in Korea. My favorite question to ask is like, is Korea gay? And the answer is yes, it has been. As well as there's a history of mudangs and things like that, bending gender and all of these things. And a mudang is like a shaman, in specifically like Korean shamanistic religions. So again, these are examples of queerness in Korea before, say, Western influences. And then following again on our timeline, we've got the Korean War. So a lot of people note this as being, say, like the most mainstream entrance of Black people in Korea, specifically Black soldiers, Black GIs. I will say that actually Black music had made it to Korea before the Korean War. There were psychedelic rock bands and things like that. There were jazz bands and things. So it's, specifically, Black culture had already migrated to Korea before, say, maybe Black people had, or maybe they had. Again, we can also surmise, or some people can surmise, because of W.B. Du Bois's trip to Japan, that maybe he did go to Korea, or maybe there were Black people in Korea or visiting Korea at the time. Um, Again, moving down the line, we've got the creation of K-pop, which is roughly in the 90s. K-pop specifically was actually started by a hip hop group, or there's two schools of thought in this, that either Sotaji and the Boys started it, or this group called High Five of the Youth. High Five of the Youth was first like idol culture, so like doing the dancing, things like that. First, like Korean popular music, or music that became popularized in Korea, was Sotaji and the Boys. And so again, this is the creation, the inception of K-pop, along with, yes, traditional Korean music elements, is still hip hop, right? So from its inception, like, you can't split the two. And then further down the line, more recent, we've got Hallyu, the Hallyu wave, globalization. And so now we've got K-pop that has then been disseminated to the world, or Korean culture as a whole that's been disseminated to the world. So again, there's this cross-cultural conversation exchange that is happening and has been happening, say, since the 50s, if not beyond, between Black and brown people, between Black Americans and Korea, between Black culture and Korea. These conversations have already been happening. Ah, da, 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 da. So again, this sets a precedent for Black culture in Korea. Even if, say, Black people were not in Korea at a certain point, Black culture was. And I know people often give the fun fact of, say, like the Black GIs and, the Korean fried chicken, and saying like the frying method that, is the exchange, the equivalent exchange, is how we've got Korean fried chicken, right? So again, conversation's been had. But again, in talking about the military, I also want to bring up, say, the US military presence in Korea, because the second kind of pushback against, say, like queer Korea, or specifically racism against Black and brown people, is that, oh, it's not no Black and brown people, it's no military, right? We just don't like the military, which I agree with. I think is a very fair assessment, because again, regardless of your politics, I think we can agree that Korea is in active, it is actively being occupied by the United States. The United States has no reason to be in Korea. That might be a hot take, cancel me if it is, but it is an active occupation, and the U.S. military presence in Korea is a problem, and has been for the past few years. So not only do we have the Yeongju Highway incident, which is where during a routine training drill, two U.S. soldiers ran over two Korean teenagers. There's so many accounts of sexual assault, of harm and things like that, enacted by U.S. service military U.S. service and military members, as well as there is pretty well known in Korea, the Southeast Asian like sex slave, like sex trading, happens explicitly outside of bases, these happy houses and things like that, specifically to service U.S. military members. It's actively going on. So again, we can understand why Koreans, Native Koreans, are upset with the US or with the military. However, anti-American sentiment is justified. I think that is more than justified given the harm that the US military, that America has enacted in Korea. However, it is not a valid justification for racism. And a lot of times these clubs will say like, oh, it's no military, no military. But again, we'll like say like what white service members in. So again, in talking about why this exists or saying like, oh, this is just embedded in the fabric of Korea, it's not. As well as they are very justified in being like, actually, service members are a problem. But you're not just denying all service members, are you? That's where we get into this. So even in these kind of pushbacks against, say, like the existence of racism, xenophobia, um, in Korea are not valid. I've just shown you they're not valid. So now we get into some talking about Web 2.0. So Web 2.0 is actually, when I made this, was our current state of the internet, but now we're actually in Web 3.0, the next generation of web that is using the same technologies, but think like AI and things like that. So that's why we're in Web 3.0. But Web 2.0 is specifically user-generated content and usability. So think apps like these: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, um, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Reddit, YouTube. All of these are Web 2.0 apps. And it's important to understand, again, what Web 2.0 is, because in trying to disseminate in today's world, you have to work with the internet. I'm sorry, we can't do smoke signals. We can't, I mean, if you want to do pigeons and things, that's your prerogative. But we, in order to be successful, have to work within the internet. The internet's also great for organizing, because even if you're not physically in the same city or physically in the same space, you can still organize. And that's why Web 2.0 was instrumental in the creation of unique situations. So TikTok actually became my outlet in Korea. So that's my handle down there. Like, share, subscribe, whatever they say. Um, but I wanted a way to digitally mark like what I was doing in Korea and my project, kind of like a digital journal. So I actually started TikTok. Um, and this is expat Pat over here. But through TikTok, I was able to meet all of these amazing people, make all of these amazing friends, also during the pandemic. So the only way we truly could meet at one point was digitally. And then we got to meet in person. And some of them actually, they visited me in Boston and things like that. So these relationships, even on TikTok, still run very deep. But yes, it became a way for me to find community during COVID, because it can be really it can be really isolating as an expat in Korea. This is also me at the Dior Cafe, which, don't just haphazardly walk into a Dior Cafe and be like, I'm gonna get myself a little drink. Most expensive drink of my life. Was it delicious? Yes. Would I do it again? Maybe. But Dior Cafe, it was cute. It was cute. I will say that. Okay. But yes, and then I used the TikTok, the small platform I had built, and the friends I had made to help this community. So, how did we do it? I've already talked about some of the ways, kind of telling you guys how specifically unique situations was made, but these are 7 steps for any kind of social media activism I believe can be applicable, and specifically in foreign countries, or to support, again, say, your communities, whatever that may be, whether it's a Black community, whether it's brown community, whether it's a queer community, whether it's people who are left-handed, whatever your community is. So first, you need to solidify the cause. Who are you doing this for and why? I think a lot of problems with, say, certain like grassroots organizing is they haven't solidified the who and the why. There's a lot of the, what do we want to tackle or what do we want to do? But specifically, which community are you trying to help? Are you trying to benefit? Are you trying to save? Are you trying to support? And why? And I say why because I think this has to come from a place of not only selflessness, but kind of like an ego-free, like, I'm not doing this for accolades, I'm not doing this for money or things like that. Like, and I do think, again, in, say, even like nonprofit or organizational spaces, like this is a very important reflection to do of like, why are we doing this? You also need to know your community. a big thing specifically as an ethnographer, like you have to know your community. You can't just be like, I know this community is having this issue because I'm on subtle Asian traits or something like that, you know? That's not knowing your community, you know? And that's another thing if it's like, again, knowing someone else's community or things like that. You've got to know your own because when you know your own is how you know how to best disseminate it, how you know best to get feedback, and how you know best to, again, organize as what? A community. And community-based work like this is so, so important. It needs to be rooted in community. It can't be rooted in singularity or it won't work. Um, I mentioned the defamation laws, which were, you know, a pain to get around, but you need to know your laws for wherever you're organizing. Say, you know, you need to record things, even if it's knowing if you're in a one-party state or a two-party state, you know, regarding recording or things like that. You need to know your laws, and specifically, again, in the country that you might be staying in. Um, Maybe you don't have to worry about it as much if you're a citizen, but I argue, especially again, in today's political climate, it is still equally as important to know your laws. Then, based on the other ones, you can organize. So, how to organize, you know, we decided that again, organizing a very small group of people and then disseminating to the community was the best way to organize. Maybe that's not what works for you. Maybe organization is a rally. Maybe it is a social media page. I know a lot of colleges are doing this for Palestine, you know, things like that. A way to organize specifically digitally that helps your cause. Then you need to gather your info. Again, we've got people, we are organized, we are one. Now we need to kind of disseminate. We need to gather all the information we can about either this issue or whatever we're trying to tackle. I think also, you know, knowing your laws does fall into gathering your info. But whatever, basically, that could be gathering info in the community, gathering info like physical, academic info, you know, it can be so many different things, but then you need to gather your info. Six, double check, triple check, quadruple check. You shouldn't be doing something again like unique situations after one pass. Um, I think what is it? You measure twice, or you measure twice, you cut once, or you measure three times and you cut once. Always, you know, double check. Make sure you're checking your bases. If you're working with a different community, a disenfranchised community, make sure that they're comfortable at all points. You know, double check. Always do your work. Um, I feel like I'm like a teacher, like, you know, you need to show your work. You got to show your work. Benchmark vibes. And then finally, make it cute. So it doesn't have to necessarily be cute, but we have to, humans are selfish in a way. We like things that look pretty. We're like little fish. Like we need information that's not only digestible, it's cute. You know, it's good to look at. So it's good to look at and it's digestible. Can't be too wordy. This also works with accessibility, you know, making sure like the font's big enough, making sure that it's not super dark colors, you know, things like that that might make it hard for other people to see. So to make it cute or aesthetic or whatever that means, and easily digestible. And that's it. You have your own unique situations. Yes. Whatever that might mean for you guys. I really hope, you know, at least like these steps help. I try to make them as applicable to like so many different things. So it's not just if you want to make your own list. Yes, if you want to make your own list, it's here. But also you can take these things, and if it's not a list, again, a rally. If it's not a rally, it's a specific page. If it's not a specific page, it's organizing in some way, like say like the boycotts, you know, whatever that might be, you now can do. But two things to keep in mind are some communities are not comfortable with their names being attached. So in this case, we weren't collecting names. And actually, as like a good like ethnography slash like IRB standard, because I know I've got some fellow sociologists, anthropologists, hopefully in the audience. But it's best to work again within these rules of anonymity. So if you're taking nicknames, but you know, you're not specifically reporting them or things. Or if you do have this information, you have to take names, like you have to keep that shit on lock. You have to keep it locked up and protected. Those are again like all IRB like research standards, specifically if you're working with individuals. And finally, proper credit. like I said from the beginning, it is, yes, I call it like my brain baby because it was initially like, I'm gonna do this, but I would not have been, this would not have been possible without the community, without the team, without expat Pat, without other expats in Korea. Like without them, I am nothing. Without them, unique situations is nothing. And I will say that till the day I die. Um, and you need to do the same. Whatever credit needs to be given, give that credit, babes. And that's it. This is unique situations. Hopefully you got a little context about Korea. A slide that I didn't add on here that I like to add on here is just some resources or places that you can go in Korea. And I'm happy to disseminate that to people after the talk or even to NABEA itself of just like resources of people to follow. Better queer activists in Korea. Amazing. I have a great, a variety of like Black DJs and models and singers and all of these people that are also, very forward facing in the fight for equality and things in Korea. And even some of those who are not Black or brown or queer in any specific way. They're just down to clown, as it were. So, yeah, again, thank you guys so, so much. I hope that you're at least coming out of this talk, maybe feeling slightly better about the world, feeling a little bit more like you can take some things on, and knowing a little bit more about Korea. And I do love this quote by my girl, Maya Angelou, who is also from Arkansas, mind you. Specifically the last part that says, as long as you're breathing, it's never too late to do some good. So I just like to leave you guys with that. Thank you. Oh, escape. I will,
Yay. Thank you so much. Now I'll stop recording for us to ask questions, but
and I will stop sharing my screen.